Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Louisa. If you're new, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're coming back, welcome back. So today I wanted to talk about the days of Noah. If you've read through the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 and 25, then you probably have come across this term. It was one of the things that Jesus said. In verse 37, he says that the coming of the Son of Man will be as the days of Noah. And I touched on this very briefly in one of my more recent videos, the one about dark mofo, and how this relates to alien disclosure. So I wanted to do a more thorough analysis of this particular aspect because it is probably going to be extremely important as the years go on and as we have more and more alien type phenomena becoming normalized. So having a Christian perspective, having a biblical worldview, I firmly believe that aliens are in the category of fallen entities. And we can see shadows of this throughout the Bible. So the first place we're going to start is Genesis chapter 6, where it actually does talk about Noah. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. And Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. So there's some very interesting verses there. First of all, who were the sons of God? Well, if you look at the different translations of this particular term, so in Hebrew it's B'nai Elohim, which essentially means that they were created by God. Human beings are known as B'nai Adam, which means that we are born from Adam. So throughout the Bible, whenever you come across the term sons of God, it usually refers to the angelic host or the heavenly host, because they don't reproduce. They're always created by God, whereas human beings do reproduce. And that's why the angels came to earth to mate with human women, because they were not able to do it amongst themselves. So in the Hebrew, where it says that there were giants on the earth in those days, the original word is Nephilim, and it means fallen ones in Hebrew. But if you have a look at the Greek Septuagint, which is the translation from Hebrew into Greek, which was done by Jewish scholars, so it wasn't done by Christians, this was pre-Christianity. The ancient Greek word that they used in the translation of Nephilim was gigantes, which is where we get the word giant from. But it doesn't actually mean giant, it means earthborn. So these were the fallen ones who were born on the earth. Funnily enough, they actually were gigantic. Possibly a double translation which worked out. So the Nephilim were a mixture of fallen angel and human DNA. And they were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. And I think you can see this throughout ancient mythology when it talks about giant people and, people like Hercules, who were essentially a mixture of gods and human. So the ancient people used to worship these fallen angels as though they were gods. And that's where you get a lot of things like, Zeus not being able to keep it in his pants. So we actually do have a foreshadowing of this. We have a prophecy in chapter 3 of Genesis where God passes judgment on the serpent and passes judgment on Adam and Eve. And he actually creates the very first prophecy recorded in the Bible. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So this is a very interesting prophecy. This is essentially the prophecy of Jesus. In the New Testament, Jesus is known as the second Adam because he was not descended from the Y chromosome of Adam. He was actually incarnated by God. He was the seed of the woman. So he bypassed the curse of Adam and brought about a new creation. But you'll notice in this passage that it has two lots of seeds. So there is the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And that's one of the main theories in Christianity, where people have not completely dismissed the supernatural as just being like allegory, where you actually do read the Bible as having literal translation. If we go back to chapter 6, where it says that Noah was perfect in his generations, it's not talking about his moral character, because later on you actually read that he was someone who had a bit of a drinking problem. But he was perfect in his genealogy, so his sons and his daughters-in-law were not genetically corrupted. So this theory is that the son of perdition, the Antichrist, will be a hybrid Nephilim, because that's essentially what the fallen angels did in Genesis chapter 6. They corrupted the DNA of humanity. They introduced an abominable blending. So we can see this also written about in the book of Jude. And now the book of Jude actually references what's called an apocrypha book, the book of Enoch. But in verse 6 and verse 7 it says, "And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. As Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar manner to these, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." So, what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, this is where Christianity tends to butt heads a lot with the alphabet movement. And realistically speaking, lust is a sin. It doesn't matter whether the lust is for pornography, or whether it's for a same-sex relationship, or whether it's for adultery, or any kind of sexual sin. It's kind of all in the same bucket. I've actually already done a video on this, so I will link it in the description box for you, but essentially Christianity tends to not give that much grace to the gay community, even though, realistically speaking, you would give grace to people who have had affairs, you would give grace to people who have porn addiction, and this should be in the same category. But one of the excuses for really targeting gay people is chapter 19 and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's have a look at what the passage actually says. "Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, 'Here now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet, then you may rise early and go on your way.' And they said, "No, but we will spend the night in the open square." But he insisted strongly, so they turned in to him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them carnally." So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, "Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish." By the way, there is a really, really good Bible study on Lot as a father, which I highly recommend. I will link it in the description box for you because, he was not as bad as the other men in his city, but he was still trash. And yet, God spared him. You have to be really bad to get judged permanently by God. He has a lot of grace, and his grace is seen throughout the Old Testament as well as the New. So we don't have enough time to really talk about this now, but there is a really good Bible study that I recommend from the channel Living on Purpose, so I will link that for you in the description box. "Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." And they said, "Stand back." Then they said, "This one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. Then the angels said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city? Take them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." So even though Lot attempted to pimp out his daughters to a rabble of men outside of his house, the angels still spared him. And again, there is a lot going on in this particular story, but as you can probably tell, the men of this city were not just fabulous. They were pretty rapey. And more importantly than that, they went after strange flesh. They tried to have sex with angels. And this is the thing that brought about the judgment. So where Jude was talking about strange flesh, he's talking about an interspecies sexual relationship. And this is something that we really have to understand when it comes to the last days, because this is going to become increasingly important, especially in light of certain things like the New Age movement. So I'm going to show you a few clips from a few different New Age teachers, and I pray for these people because I used to watch their content. I think that they're nice people, I think that they're good people, but I think that they're also very misled because they have been interacting with these particular fallen entities. And so there might be things that we can learn from what it is that they're talking about, but because they don't have the biblical perspective, they don't have the whole picture. So let's have a look at some of these stories about starseeds.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Stargirl and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to help you starseeds figure out what your starseed origin is. If you don't know what a starseed is a multi-dimensional being, an alien so to speak, who has decided to reincarnate into the human form during this time, during the age of Aquarius, to help transition the world into a higher vibrational state of living and to help awaken the world and also to experience the human condition. So because of this, starseeds actually have origins in different parts of the galaxies as different kinds of alien species. Now, unfortunately, when starseeds reincarnate on Earth, they go through amnesia, which means they forget where their origins are and who they truly are. And this is for the purpose of experiencing the human condition in its full glory. So if you're someone who resonates with the label starseed, or you always felt like you were a starseed, today I'm going to help you figure out what kind of alien being you really are and where it is you are really from.
A couple months ago, I told you guys about the alien that showed up in my bedroom, projected an image of a baby on my wall, and everything that ensued after that. Today I want to give you a little update on that. So I just wanted to do a little check-in with you guys because a lot of you, I'm surprised actually, have been asking for starseed videos, and I kind of backed off on making them because I know that it is part of my mission here on Earth to spread awareness, but I'm kind of making the journey a little bit more personal because I did get attacked a lot online, which is understandable. When people are exposed to something that they don't know about, something that makes them feel fearful or uncertain, it's very, very common and very appropriate to feel a little uncomfortable with things like that. However, I do believe that starseeds and this whole alien thing does go hand in hand with spirituality, and that's something that people are going to have to come to terms with because it's just what reality is. And I know that there's a lot of people who are afraid of demons, think that aliens might be demons. Aliens are not demons. That's just, it's two different things. Whether they both exist, in my own personal opinion, they do both exist. They exist in very different ways. And just separate the thoughts of demons and fear and negativity from the thought of aliens. Most of us are afraid of aliens because we don't have an idea to conceive what they actually are. So these videos are going to make you more familiar with them. And don't get me wrong, after that encounter that I had in my bedroom, I was terrified and couldn't sleep for months. I had the hardest time sleeping, had to start taking melatonin, and I've honestly not taken anything for pain or for anything for such a long time, so it was really hard for me to have to start taking melatonin. But once I've started to accept what everything is, what's happening to me, what's happening to a majority of the world, and how it's actually a good thing, that fear is going away slowly but surely. It's definitely going away, and especially after what happened today, and that's why I'm making this video. So when I thought about that, I calmed down and I went up to the microphone and I said, "Hello, Bashar." He said, "And to you, good day," whatever he says. And I detailed to him a little bit about what happened to me on that night, early January. I was drifting off to sleep, but I was awakened by a being, an extraterrestrial being. I didn't give any information on what kind or anything like that. An extraterrestrial being was standing next to me. My body was paralyzed basically from the neck down. My head could barely move. I could just move my eyes a little bit. And this being projected an image of a baby on my wall. That's all I said. And Bashar said to me, "Yes, your baby." And at first I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know if it's my baby," or he's like, "No, your baby. It's your hybrid baby. It's my hybrid baby." And he's like, "Yes, you have them. You have many or something. You have several." And basically I was just like, so that contact, that meeting with this alien that was next to me was meant to happen so that I could become aware that I have hybrid children. Bashar also told me that these hybrid babies want to make contact with me. They want to communicate with me. They want to have a relationship with me. They don't have one right now because of my fear. My fear is so thick and so strong that it's put a full wall between me and my hybrid children. That's pretty damn cool. So I decided that that is something that I want. And Bashar told me exactly what I should say. He said that I need to ask for more information, that I need to ask for connection with them. I need to ask to receive communication from them. I need to want it. I need to be willful about it. And it's actually funny, I didn't mention this to Bashar, but back in Sedona, one of the nights we were having, Aaron and I just had the most UFO-filled trip. I had seen my first UFO ever. I know I sound really nonchalant about it. Trust me, when it happened, I don't know if I talked about it in a previous video, when it happened, I lost my mind and just I had to accept that what I am seeing is true. I don't know what else it could have been. There was no building up that high. We're in Sedona. There's no high buildings. It's a bright white light and it's making figure 8 signs and going back and forth and up and down. And it's kind of like messing with us almost. And that week, the night after that UFO experience, I woke up to laughter and running around in my room. And mind you, if this was sleep paralysis or something like that, young laughter, it literally sounded like children. If this was sleep paralysis or lower dimensional beings, you guys know I'm terrified of that. I would have been scared out of my mind. This felt so different. I wasn't ready, so I buried my head in the pillow because I was not ready. But I'm almost positive now that that was kind of like my hybrid children coming to visit me. And they come at night because that is when our consciousness is more open and more malleable, so we can be more open to their presence and to conceive of them. It's nothing scary. Like, they're a part of you. You agreed, or I agreed, to be a part of this hybridization program at a soul level. I agreed to this. This was something I agreed to.
I just wanted to share how I got into this, how I can actually talk about this, why I talk about it, and my story. How did I get into ETs? How did I realize I had a connection with ETs, and how did I connect with my ET guides? And I hope that my story might be similar to your story, because through my process, you might learn your own. I started to make videos in 2008. Basically the same kind of topics I do now. And before that, I had never associated aliens, ETs, or even space, the cosmos, with spirituality. I was into, more like ghosts and angels and definitely psychic phenomenon and definitely spirituality, but I was not associating aliens anywhere near spirituality, and maybe that's where a lot of people are. And in my mind, I always associated aliens with sci-fi and with like Star Trek conventions and like really kind of geeky. And I'm a geek now, but that's kind of what I associated it with. And then I was actually working in Japan, in Tokyo. I think it was in 2007, and I was really lonely, and I did not, I was really homesick, and of course, everyone speaks Japanese, no one really speaks English, so I was just missing hearing English or hearing language that I knew, and I didn't have any friends. It's very lonely, at first anyway, and I would just basically sit in my little room. Luckily, I had a room of my own at that time, and I would sit in my room and I would just meditate, and I would just do mantras. I would do a lot of Indian-style mantras, and I would meditate for about 45 minutes at a time, and I would just completely let go of everything. And I did this for probably about 3 weeks, I think. It's really hard to associate your intuitive hits or your information with being your guides or coming from a higher dimension, because it just so much feels like your own. So I was getting a lot of intuitive insights, but I wasn't by any means intending on connecting with anything. I was just meditating. One day I'm meditating, and this is after about the 3 weeks, and I just start to see the word Pleiadians, and it was flashing in my mind like letters, and the letters were kind of a bluey purple, and around was yellow, and I ignored it. I completely ignored it.
I thought it was one of those weird things that just happens because your mind is releasing whatever happened during the day. But after that point, after that one time I saw it, every single time that I went into meditation, I would see it again. And it just kept getting more and more, every single time I meditated, more and more obvious that this was a word that I should pay attention to. And then eventually I started to feel a specific energy, a specific, empathically I started to feel a different energy than I had recognized. It was through the heart, and it was really velvety and very loving. So now I was seeing the words, and now I'm also feeling a different energy come through my heart and kind of fill up my body. And I started to Google, okay, well, like what's happening? Who are these beings? Who are the, what's going on? And of course I find out that the Pleiades is a star system, and this was almost 10 years ago, so there wasn't actually a lot of information. So I went on and I found out that these are basically extraterrestrial beings, and but what surprised me was that they were ET beings, but they had kind of a very strong spirituality to them. They had the desire to assist in consciousness, and that was really shocking, because at that moment I finally put together, okay, extraterrestrial beings are spiritual just like humans are, just like every other living creature. And my mind was kind of blown. And then eventually the next time I meditated, I can't remember if I asked or if it just came through. I'm pretty sure it just came through, but there was the same being that was in my dreams, and she said, "Hi, I am Salanaha, and I am your guide, and I'm here to work with you." And so that was when I made the connection with my first ET guide, and that was when I realized that your guides are not some being that's outside of you, that is, and like another, has like no connection to you. Your guides are you.
I am a spiritual being having a spiritual human experience. I am the eternal self, and I know who I am. I am the perfect expression. I am the power, master, and cause of my emotions.
So there's a few things to take note of after having looked at that. Number one is these particular entities always come with these very blasphemous kinds of messages, such as the I am messages. The New Age is full of affirmations, and these are things that are supposed to help you with your mental health. However, they essentially put you into this almost godlike persona. So it's the exact same lie that you see from the Garden of Eden, where the serpent says to Eve, "You shall be like God." Why are I am affirmations so blasphemous? Well, let's have a look at Exodus chapter 3. "And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you." It was very much understood throughout the whole Israelite history that the name I am is actually God's name. This is the name of Yahweh. And so it was utter blasphemy to use this name in reference to yourself. You were essentially calling yourself God if you did that. And this is one of the things that got Jesus into trouble, because he actually is God. So it was appropriate for him to use this particular pronoun. But when he did it in front of the religious leaders, they tried to kill him. And we can see an example of this in John chapter 8. Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. So Jesus used the I am as a claim to his deity, and they understood that immediately, and they tried to stone him for it. So the New Age, with all of its mental health advice and all of its self-glorification and self-care, it's all about elevating human beings to the status of God. And it's not that people are intending to do this, they're just being taught this by these entities. They don't realize how much of an affront it actually is to God. They just think that they're working on their mental health. But as I talked about in a previous video, it doesn't really help. There's a lot of mental health issues in the New Age community, so I will link that particular video in the description box as well, and you can check that out. But as you could also see from those excerpts, there's a lot of information out there about like, which star seed are you? Do you come from this particular set of stars, or do you come from a different set of stars? And again, this is something that I was also involved in when I was involved in the New Age, because it's very much intertwined. You can't really separate the whole alien phenomena from spirituality, because they are actually intertwined. She was quite correct in saying that, but she doesn't understand what that means. They're always taught that this is a good thing. So even though they have a lot of very scary experiences with things like sleep paralysis, as you could see from some of that, they're constantly told that this is good, and they are constantly told that they agreed to it before they were born. So this is something that puts people into bondage. They think that they are complicit in this instead of actually realizing that they are victims. So these entities are victim blaming. They are telling their targets that they agreed to this when they really didn't. And there are so many accounts out there of things happening in sleep paralysis, which in the old days were attributed to incubus and succubus, basically sexual molestation and rape. And people are undergoing things like science experiments and probing and having their DNA stolen. And when we look at this in light of something like Genesis chapter 6, I think they actually are stealing DNA from people and stealing things like sperm, because there's all of this stuff about hybrid children, and people are like, oh, I guess I have alien children now and I should just embrace this. And it's like, no, dude, you were raped and then used in a science experiment against your will. This is not good. Like, this is really evil. But yeah, they're constantly being brainwashed by these entities that keep telling them, you know, this is for your ascension, this is for your higher purpose, you chose this. So, what exactly are these things planning? Well, during the Olivet Discourse in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus also talked about the prophecies of Daniel. And he said that the key to understanding the end times were the prophecies in Daniel. So let's have a look at Daniel chapter 2. Now in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to all the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give you the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered again and said, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you, for you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time is changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation." The Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such a thing of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." For this reason the king was angry and very furious, and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, "Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation." Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king, and said thus to him, "I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known to the king the interpretation." The king answered and said to Daniel, whose Babylonian name was Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen, and its interpretation?" Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this, and he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes was made known the interpretation to the king, that you may know the thoughts of your heart. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while the stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So that was essentially the first vision in the book of Daniel. And as you saw in verse 43, the seed mingled with the seed of man, but it did not adhere to one another the way that iron does not adhere to clay. Throughout the book of Daniel, we get visions of different beasts, which are once more paralleled in Revelation, and that is probably a video all on its own. But the empires which were seen in that particular vision of Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold was the Babylonian Empire, the chest of silver and the arms of silver that was the Medo-Persian Empire. The belly and thighs of bronze, that was Alexander the Great. The legs of iron were the Roman Empire, and then the feet of iron and clay, that's the very last empire, which we have yet to really see take form. Although there is a lot of speculation that this particular empire is going to be a Western empire involving Europe, America, places like Australia. It's 10-toed, which is the same as the beast in Revelation. The beast in Revelation has 10 horns. So the horns and the toes represent the different kingdoms that come together in order to form the final empire. So what does the final empire have to do with aliens? If we look back on all of these prophecies that have to do with seed, then we can see that it has a lot to do with the prophecy in Genesis chapter 3. It has a lot to do with the days of Noah in Genesis chapter 6. And it's all related to the prophecies of Daniel. These are the keys to understanding that we were given by Jesus in Matthew 24. So it's essentially another invasion of the fallen angels, where they come disguised as something completely different. They undermine the message of the Bible. They basically contradict the Bible. They bring in this new one world religion full of like peace and unity, but it's a false peace and unity. This enlightenment era, but it's a false light. You know, people are going to be woke, but it's going to be this fake awakening. It's not going to be an awakening to the truth of the Bible. It's going to be an awakening to a false gospel. And we have foreshadowings of this throughout things like that book, A Course in Miracles, where it's supposedly channeled by Jesus. You see all these people who claim to have visitations from Jesus which contradict what it was that he taught in the Bible. And you see this all the time with all of these New Age channeling and mediumship type things where you have like Bashar.
If you say so.
What is that that's coming through?
You tell me. Remember, I am not speaking even the English language. No. I am simply sending thought pulses, and they are being translated into the language that the channel understands. So the channel is simply acting as a biological translator, and if the channel's brain cannot make sense out of it, it usually will not translate on this end either.
They claim to have the true revelations of Jesus. They claim to have new revelations of Jesus. And you see examples of this with like the guy who wrote the Passion Translation. He was also visited by Jesus and told that there is another chapter of the book of John. And if you have a look at how he talks about anointed ones in the Bible, he talks about Christians as being anointed ones, as though we are also messiahs. So this is something that Bethel is very subtly pushing, and they have an awful lot of New Age practices in their particular camp.
You're with Christalignment at Rainbow Serpent. How did your reading go?
It was really, really good. Really good. Yep. There were some things that were so spot on that brought some tears to my eyes a little bit, but it was really, really good. It was spooky. I didn't think it would be that spot on.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I was walking past and then decided that I would come back, and we just went in, sat down. I was talking to the lady over there.
Yes.
And I don't know, like, she just guided me through whatever I was feeling, whatever I was seeing, and sort of explained that to me, and then I explained what I was feeling, which was like this burning like whirlwind here, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I got like a rush of excitement when it happened, and I was like, I don't know what to do.
okay. It happened?
So I took heaps of acid, like walking around being like, I don't know what's going on, like what am I doing? I lost everyone, or maybe I just ditched everyone, I'm not really sure. Yeah. But I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then you said something about the tattoo and I was like, yeah, okay. And then I realized this place is really pretty. And you guys are doing readings and I always wanted to have a reading.
For example, they promote divination, which is explicitly forbidden in the Bible. So this is the group Christalignment that you saw the video of earlier, and they're affiliated with Bethel. And as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 18, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord. God explicitly forbids all of these practices. This is not Christianity. So they use these destiny cards, which is basically just a Christianese version of oracle cards. Like, I used oracle cards when I was a witch. So what they're promoting is witchcraft. Okay, so this is the official statement from the Bethel website to do with Christalignment. They say that they are not officially affiliated, but they have connections with Christalignment. And they say, we do, however, have a value for what they are seeking to accomplish. When all of this came to our attention, we reached out to the Hodges to make sure we understood what they were doing and how they were trying to accomplish it. We've included a letter from them about their way of inviting people to encounter God in the context of festivals. Of course, as we rightly assumed, they are not using Christian tarot cards nor telling the future with cards. They stand in agreement with the scriptures that all occult practices have no place in the kingdom and should not be used. We understand that the cards have the look of something that Christians don't value and find dangerous, namely tarot cards. There are times when the way a message is presented is so off-putting that it actually drowns out the intended message. At those times, it is appropriate to speak up and ask questions, and perhaps that is what people are attempting to do. It is our hope that people would direct these questions to the Hodges themselves. So in this situation, they're using semantics because people have said that they were tarot cards, and they're saying, well, no, they're not tarot cards. And technically, that's true because I used to read tarot cards, but I also used to read oracle cards, which is what these cards are. They've just been relabeled. But the thing is, the Bible does not explicitly forbid tarot because tarot did not exist back then. It forbids divination, which is what they are doing. Moreover, the head of Bethel Church, Bill Johnson, wrote a book called The Physics of Heaven, where he condones things such as necromancy in the form of what's called grave sucking. And he also denies the deity of Jesus, literally saying that Jesus is not God. And the purpose of this is to tell his congregation that they are equal to Jesus, that they are gods. And there's this blending of the New Age with Christianity in the form of things like Christalignment, which are the people who make these cards that Bethel has endorsed. Bill Johnson's explanation for why he says such things is that he wants revival in the church and for Christians to operate in the gifts of the Spirit. However, Bill has seriously misunderstood the concepts of the hypostatic union and kenosis. The hypostatic union is the concept of Jesus being fully God and fully human during his earthly ministry, or 100% God, 100% man. As for the Greek word kenosis, it was only used once in Philippians chapter 2, verse 7, where it says, "Let this mind be in you which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This passage does not say that Jesus stopped being God. It actually says that he continued to be God, and that it was not robbery for him to be equal with God. However, he set aside his own reputation and took the form of a servant, and then was obedient unto death. That's the model that Christians are supposed to follow. We're supposed to be obedient to the will of the Father. Whenever you're dealing with people who operate in the flesh but think that they're spiritual, all of their spiritual understanding is fleshly, and you'll often see them speaking in terms of power. Rather than wanting to be obedient to God and seeking his will in the matter, they're always asking, how do I get more power? How do I use more power? Power, power, power. That's the flesh talking. The Spirit, on the other hand, prompts us to ask, how can I do the will of the Father? That's the model which Jesus set for us as his followers, to be obedient to the point of death. Once again, we have a case of slippery semantics and a twisting of Scripture. Bill Johnson seems to think that the way to grab power and elevate man is to diminish Jesus, which tells me that he doesn't understand the point at all. Christians only have authority and power because of the deity of Jesus. It's who he is that gives us the ability to cast out demons and perform miracles. As Philippians says, Jesus is the name above all names, and every knee will bow and confess that. James chapter 2, verse 19 reiterates this. You believe that there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. You know you're in trouble when demons have a better perspective of who God is than you do. And Luke chapter 10 says, Then the 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. Jesus had sent out 70 disciples to preach and cast out demons before the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, which meant that the demons obeyed purely because Jesus has authority over them. Jesus cannot set aside his deity because it's who he is. And in Mark chapter 1 it says, Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, Be quiet and come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. You can see from this that the demons recognize him immediately, and they have a better perspective of who he is than most humans do. So Christians have the authority and the power of Jesus because he lends it to us, because it is his. And we only have it while we are doing the will of the Father. If we go off on our own and start doing our own thing, he does not lend us his power. It is for a purpose, and it's not for our own purposes. You get into some very dangerous territory when you call yourself an apostle. As it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. So you can see the parallels between the aliens presenting themselves as light beings and spiritual guides for people. The Bible does say that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light, but it also says that he has ministers who are within the church, and this is the thing that we really need to be watching out for. So this whole doctrine of peace, love, and tolerance, it's just leading us down the ecumenical garden path, where rather than having a separation from the world, Christians are going to be fellowshipping with all sorts of other religions. And you see things like holy yoga, which is not holy. It's yoga. Yoga is a Hindu practice.
May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace. Peace in our families, peace across this land, and dare I ask, O Lord, peace even in this chamber, now and evermore. We ask it in the name of the monotheistic God, Brahma, and God known by many names, by many different faiths. Amen and a woman.
Yoga is literally an offering to Hindu gods. Like, you can't offer that to God. He won't accept it. And you see other things like the Enneagram. I was gobsmacked when I came into Christianity after being saved from the occult. And I walk in and there's occult practices being done in church and being called Christian. They are not Christian. And no amount of telling people that these things have come from channeled material. Like, there was a whole video that Doreen Virtue did on the Enneagram, which I will link in the description box as well, because you need to see that. But she spent an hour outlining all of the evidence that this is an occult practice. And there were people in the comments who were like, I think God can use it. I'm still going to practice it. Are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? People actually think that they can tell God what God should find acceptable. And it's one of the catchphrases of the hypercharismatic movement that they say, don't put God in a box. We're not putting God in a box. God told us what he finds acceptable and what he does not. And what you're teaching people is an abomination. Like, honestly, Christians these days have no shame. And the problem is that they're not actually Christian. They just think that they are. If they have ever been born again, I would be surprised. But if they were, I don't think they are anymore. Like, I don't think they are saved anymore, if that's what they're doing. Because you cannot have idolatry and witchcraft and have God at the same time. What Christians seem to forget a lot is that we are not married to the Lamb yet. The wedding supper of the Lamb has not taken place. What you have as a Christian is an engagement, and an engagement can be broken off. If the bride proves to be a whore, if the bride proves to be unfaithful, this is seen repeatedly throughout the Bible, where God literally calls Israel a whore. And as the natural branches were cut off because of their idolatry, you should not be so comfortable after being grafted in. In Revelation 17 it says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman, drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition, and those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits." Now, when it comes to Bible prophecy, a lot of it is conjecture, and we should never be particularly dogmatic about what we believe when it comes to things that haven't actually happened yet. However, the imagery used in the Bible for various different meanings is consistent, and women in the Bible are usually referring to churches or referring to the bride of Christ or the people of God. So we can hazard a guess that the Whore of Babylon is not just a city, but actually a church. Potentially a one world, one religion church, which incorporates all of the other religions on the planet. There's also 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and it's possible that they refer to an actual city with actual mountains, such as Rome, or as I mentioned in a previous video, San Francisco would fit the bill as well. However, the mountains could be allegorical. We could be talking about the 7 Mountain Mandate, which is a whole separate topic in and of itself, which I will cover at some point in the future. We will have to wait and see what unfolds in the future. However, Bill Johnson does have a strange fascination with invasion and invading places, which is an interesting choice of words. The prophecy continues in Revelation 18, where it says, "After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities." True followers of Christ are mandated to be separate from the world. We're not supposed to take part in other spiritualities. That's considered unfaithfulness to God. That's why it's called fornication. God is calling us out of sinful churches so that we do not take part in their condemnation. If you have gone down the route of self-idolization in the form of the Enneagram or in the form of affirmations or anything like that, yoga, meditation, it's all self-idolatry and you need to repent. This is literally what apostasy is. It's where you stop worshipping God and you stop following God and you start following false gods and false idols. And you can turn yourself into a false idol just as easily as you can turn anyone else into a false idol. And one of the problems with the mega churches is how many of them basically worship their pastors. What Christians often don't understand about the spiritual war is that, yes, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but we wrestle with ideas. And there are some very dangerous ideas out there that you need to be aware of, which is why the command is to guard your hearts and minds. This is an example of one of the founders of the New Age, Alice Bailey. As she wrote in her book, Christianity must also be overthrown because it is based on Jewish sources. The rule of Christ must come to an end because only the rule of force is right. In the world order of the Axis powers, the individual has no rights. He has no freedom except insofar as he serves the state. There will be no liberty of thought or conscience. All issues will be decided by the state, and the private citizen will have no right to an opinion. Men will be drafted like slaves into the service of the state. And there you have it. That's the New Age agenda in a nutshell. It's the same as the New World Order. And it starts by overthrowing Christianity, not from the outside, from the inside. And if you want to know the source of their inspiration, you should look no further than Lucifer himself, who they write about copiously. They have so many articles and books extolling the virtues of Lucifer, and they name all of their things after him until it becomes a problem to the public, and then they change the name to something like Lucius. But essentially, these people are Satanists. That is what they do, that is who they serve, and you are joining in if you take part in these activities. They hate Christianity, and they love Satan, and they have absolutely no problem with telling you how great Satan is. They are all over the Christian channels, insisting that God is evil and saying that Satan is their savior. Well, good luck with that one. The thing that people have misunderstood about the last days is that the deception is going to be so good and so clever that if it were possible to deceive the elect, even they would be sucked in. It's not going to look like a bad thing. It's going to look like a very good thing. And that's why many people are going to be sucked in. They're going to be enamored with this. They're going to want this. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, it says, "But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober." So for Christians, the command is to know the scriptures, to know the prophecy, and to be watching out for the signs of the end of time. Let's have a quick look at Matthew 24. "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be." So again, to most of the world, this is not going to be anything particularly dramatic. They are not really going to understand that judgment is coming. And earlier on in Matthew 24, Jesus talks about the prophecy of Daniel. "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads this, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." So swift destruction is going to come in the form of the Antichrist for the saints. But then people are going to think that the Antichrist is actually ridding the world of a problem, that the Antichrist is going to be getting rid of those pesky Christians who keep interfering with everyone's peace and love and unity and all of these things. The Christians are going to be the ones who are not towing the line, who are not on board with the agenda. So in Daniel chapter 9, we have the abomination of desolation. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the Prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with the flood, and till the end of the war desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So this is one of the main prophecies of the coming of Jesus. And if you're wondering if 69 weeks passed between when the restoration of Jerusalem and the building of the temple was decreed until the time of Jesus, then yes, it was. In this particular instance, what they're talking about in weeks is a week of years. So in the book of Jubilees and in the Hebrew calendar, they had what was known as weeks of years. So it was this cycle where they would go through 6 years of harvesting and planting and tilling the land, and then they would have a whole year of rest. So it was like a year of Sabbath, and God would bless the land so much in the 6th year that they had enough to last them through until the next lot of harvesting. So it was this particular cycle of years that they went through. So if you look at like 7 times 7, that's the 70 weeks which was promised in the book of Daniel. And so Jesus was cut off in the 69th week. And then the people of the prince who is to come, which is the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire destroyed the temple. And then the prince who is to come is basically the Antichrist. On the wing of abominations is the one who makes desolate. But you'll notice just before that, it talks about how he makes an accord with people for 1 week. So that's, again, a week of years. That's the tribulation. That's why it's known as a 7-year tribulation. So it starts with peace. It starts with a peace accord, which is why a lot of people were speculating that it might actually be Trump, because he brought in the Abraham Accords, and that was a peace deal in the Middle East. So the Antichrist is going to look like a peacemaker, and he is going to bring together all of these nations under one common religion. They're all going to have the same goal. They're going to be loving one another, except for those Christians. And the Christians are going to be economically suppressed, and then they're going to be executed. And unfortunately, in America, there's a fairly recent teaching which is known as the pre-tribulation rapture, for which there is absolutely no biblical evidence. And instead there is repeated evidence that Christians are going to be going through the tribulation, but it's this thing of like, it's another trap. It's another way to make people lose their faith. So there's this lie going around saying that if you're a Christian, you're going to be raptured out before the tribulation. And it's just not true. Jesus himself says in Matthew 24, after the tribulation of those days. But people believe what they want to believe, and it's setting themselves up for failure. So hopefully soon I will do another video on this, because it's going to become extremely relevant. There actually are international laws currently in place in order to have the execution of Christians. And so I want to do a video on the Noahide laws at some point in the future. I don't know when the Holy Spirit wants me to talk about that, but probably soon. These laws have actually been in place in America since the 1990s. They just haven't been enacted yet. And there is a protest against them currently in Australia. So I don't know how far they've gotten in Australia yet, but these are laws which are seen as like general universal moral laws, and they are essentially going to set Christians up as being idolaters, because you're not allowed to worship Jesus as God. But that is a whole nother video. It's quite complex, and it's going to take a while to go through that. But that was a look at the days of Noah. So if you enjoyed that, please share it. Don't forget to subscribe, like. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.
A man and a woman